Welcome to another episode of Developer Weekly. This week I'm talking with Justin Barnett. Justin is an emerging leader in virtual reality and has an awesome YouTube channel where he posts tutorials for VR developers and discusses various virtual reality tips and tricks. Hey Justin, how are you doing?
Hey, I'm good. Glad to be here.
Yeah, thank you very much for being on the show. I found you by looking at your YouTube channel, which by the way has incredible production value. Looks like studio production stuff. I don't know how you do it.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, it's really good. I saw it in a pop-up in a link on in a feed on LinkedIn where I think your dad liked it or something. So you see how small this
Yeah,
world is and how
right.
people get connected. So that's really great. And I just I'm very intrigued by the world of VR, augmented reality, mixed reality, all that stuff. I think it's very exciting. I think it's going to be part of the future. I don't know when yet, but we'll discuss it a little bit as well. What you think of that? But first, so you do a little bit of VR as well. A little bit. You know a lot about it. How did you get into virtual reality?
Well, you mentioned my dad. Both my parents are software developers, so you can imagine
Cool.
growing up in a household of very analytical thinkers. So growing up, I was almost just by osmosis knew how to analyze things and take complicated tasks and move them into like simple like step-by-step things and whatnot. So I was the kid when I was in middle school who everyone else would do a PowerPoint presentation. I would make a website for my presentation with links and different pictures to the different things. So I just kind of grew up in the coding space, which was, it's good. I thoroughly enjoy coding and it's like one of my hobbies and pastimes too. But it kind of took a turn towards virtual reality when, I don't know if you've read the book Ready Player One.
Oh yeah.
It's a movie now, but it's this virtual utopia where the world has kind of turned into VR and almost nobody does real world work anymore. It's all like in VR. You make money in VR, you do entertainment in VR, all that kind of stuff. And after reading that book, my mind was just racing with thoughts of like, oh, there's so many possibilities of things I could do with this VR platform. So I started out doing a little like learning how to do game development, 3D game development a little bit, and then I just couldn't stand it anymore. I had to switch over to VR and learn how to do it because it's a completely different medium, different inputs, different, like, it's not a joystick. You feel totally immersed. It's a crazy platform, and obviously I'm pretty excited about its development and starting to come around.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I did read Ready Player One, and I saw the movie as well. I recently actually listened to an audiobook of Ready Player Two, which was also pretty good actually.
That is
Just
a good one.
continues
I've read that
story.
one too.
Yeah, it's pretty good. So did you study game development or software development in any formal way?
I first started going to university for mechatronic engineering, which is basically robots. And that was like my first, because I'm very like a hands-on kind of person, so I didn't really want to go like the just software developer route because I was like, oh, I'm just gonna be sitting behind a desk all day and it's gonna be boring. And I wanted to like machine stuff and have robots that walk around and that kind of stuff. And I tried that for a time, but the electrical engineering part of that curriculum was very difficult for me to understand. So I ended up at some point just switching over to purely software engineering. And so I ended up getting a major in software engineering, which helps with any kind of coding, as you can imagine. It's basically like
absolutely.
souped up computer science degree, I guess.
Yeah. And what kind of programming languages did you focus on?
C#'s my main one, which is the game development platform that I use to develop virtual reality applications, is based off of C#, which helps a lot.
Ah, okay. Yeah. Mine is also usually C#, as I am a Microsoft boy, as in I grew up in the Microsoft ecosystem. So, I started with Visual Basic and then Visual Basic.net and then, graduated to C# now.
There you go. The big boy
Still,
language.
Well, there are lots of great languages and C# is just one of them as well. So, okay. So you didn't want to kind of do what your parents did, sit behind a desk and look at code all day, which is pretty cool as well. I do get the charm of making things work in the real world, especially with robots, which is very cool. And VR is kind of akin to that, right? Where you can make something happen.
Yeah, it's along that lines. I think I saw at one point, I don't remember where I saw it, but it was, or maybe it was just a revelation I had while I was doing the curriculum for robotics, was someone controlling a robot with a like VR haptic rig, and their hands would move the robot hands. And like the connection I saw was, I was like, whoa, okay, this is like cool. Cause you can use this for like more real world stuff too. Like, cause in my head at first it was just like, oh, it's just a gaming thing. Like people just like are really immersed in the game and they can like hold objects and whatnot. But seeing that kind of application really led me to like think of like what other things could like you do with this, because it kind of could overlap into the real world with machinery and whatnot.
Yeah, absolutely. So before we get into VR too much, let's just step a little bit back and let's define what virtual reality is. Because nowadays there are lots of terms, like there's mixed reality, there's augmented reality, there's virtual reality. Like, what's the difference? Can you explain it?
Yeah, sure. So the big overarching term for all of it is extended reality, or shortened to
Oh,
XR.
okay.
So that kind of includes augmented, mixed, and virtual. Virtual is, probably what most people think of when they think of this kind of reality space. Is you wear a headset and your vision's completely blocked out and replaced by some artificial image, and then you're hearing the idea is you're completely immersed in another world. So that's virtual reality. But then augmented and mixed reality are cool because they kind of bring it back into the real world, and that's what Microsoft's trying to do with the HoloLens right now. So augmented reality is basically just it's an overlay. Like think of it almost like a heads up display. So you can walk around and you can see notifications and whatnot. But mixed reality takes it to a different level, where the mixed reality application can actually identify objects in your space and overlay virtual objects into that space too. So like, for instance, there's a counter over in your living room and you're using your mixed reality headset. The headset can identify the counter, and if you're talking to another person virtually, it can place them behind the counter in your real world space. But like, so it's
Oh,
kind of like
okay.
this mesh between a real and virtual, but it causes them to interact together. So you can pick up different objects in the real world, and that'll affect the virtual objects as well. So it's kind of that interplay, which is pretty cool.
Oh, that is very, very interesting. Yeah. So I think the big application that people maybe got interested or at least used to the term augmented reality was, I think, Pokemon Go, right? That's kind of the
Oh, yep,
classic
yep.
example of augmented reality. Did you play it?
I never played Pokemon Go. That was right before I got into it. I just
Uh,
saw everyone running around, like going to different places, and I just thought, oh, that's so much work to like play Pokemon.
yeah.
But yeah,
Well, I thought it
that
was.
uses augmented reality applications where it just kind of overlays stuff.
Yeah, I think that was very clever. And,
Yeah,
it's baked into your device. So everybody already has a device. You don't need a fancy setup or something. So
exactly.
we have virtual reality, and that's your focus, right? Right now,
Hmm.
and you already talked a little bit about use cases for virtual reality. What are the use cases for virtual reality? You said like we have mixed reality, for instance, where you can also interact with the real world, and with virtual reality, for instance, you could control robots or robot arms or something like that, which is awesome. What kind of other use cases are there for virtual reality? Why would you use it?
Well, I mean, there's the obvious use case for gaming and just kind of recreational activities.
Yeah.
But then there's a social element. So there's some applications. VR chat is one of them that's big right now, where you just pop into a chat room, but you're a virtual avatar. And so interacting with other people virtually feels a lot more real. It feels like you're there actually talking to the person instead of just, on a phone call with audio or whatever. It's like you can see their mannerisms and the way their body moves because of the virtual reality tracking and whatnot. So it kind of adds a little different dynamic. But then there's also like, I weirdly went on a ski trip a couple weeks ago and met in line a guy who is a miner. So they like mine coal and minerals from the earth.
Oh,
And
right.
he's
Yeah.
saying that they're using virtual reality applications to train the workers on the equipment. So they use these big
Oh, right.
loaders
Yeah.
and dump trucks and stuff, like big heavy machinery, diggers and whatnot for mining. And it's like you can't really use that big. You can't have like an extra one for training off to the side because they're like millions and millions of dollars, and they don't have that kind of availability. Like it's got to be always running for it to be making money. And so they've started to use virtual reality applications to train newcomers in the equipment and learn how to use it. And he also said that they're working on putting 360 cameras on the machines and then making it so it can be totally automated, and like the workers could just like work from home, but then they put on this haptic rig and VR headset, and they can drive the machines and operate the mechanics and whatnot from home. Even though it's like normally you'd be in the cockpit driving the machine, you just have a 360 camera in there and you can look around and even have more visuals better than what you could in person, which is
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah.
And then you think of that and you can apply that to medical technology, doing surgeries with really fine points of grip and whatnot with the fine tools. The doctors can just put on a virtual reality headset and see really, really with the small cameras and use the small like pinchers and stuff on the tools to like do really fine surgery, that kind of thing. And then there's also like when you start talking about mixed reality and whatnot, it's a complete game changer, I think, because that's kind of where I see the world going in the future. Like, I think mixed reality headsets like the HoloLens are going to completely replace television and phones and all of that. Like, anything that has like a screen attached to it will be obsolete. Like, you won't need anything with a screen on it because like you'll just be able to put on your virtual reality glasses and say, oh, I want to watch TV. I'm just going to project Netflix onto this wall over here. I don't need like an actual TV. And then like all my notifications come in. And so it'll end up being the communication device is your virtual reality or augmented mixed reality headset. Completely change the
Yeah.
world, how
Yeah.
the world
That
works in the
is
future.
so absolutely exciting. Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I had a couple of guests on here, Steven van Bellegem and Richard Campbell as well, who also spoke about this as in
Mm-hmm.
a future vision, where we walk around with these glass cubes here, kind of ridiculous. Everybody watches these, and back in the
Uh-huh.
day, like I don't know, 15 years ago, nobody could imagine that we would be doing this. It would be ridiculous, right? So it would not be a stretch of the imagination to think that we might all have, I don't know, glasses on, just maybe good looking glasses that do kind of the same and give you all that information in the future. I think that's definitely going to happen. And it's going to be so revolutionary. Like you said, there are so incredibly many powerful use cases. This is just going to change the world. But then why aren't we there yet? We have VR already. Why isn't everybody using it? What do you think?
I mean, VR's been an idea and even like a prototype since I think the 90s, where they came up and started trying stuff out. But I think it really just is so it's like the technology, the computers are getting smaller and smaller and smaller, where now an iPhone is more powerful than a lot of laptop computers, especially with the new M1 chip. So that kind of core processor technology is becoming more and more readily available and lighter, smaller, faster, not as powerful or not as power consuming. But also there's I think there's a little bit of fear, I guess, like because like motion sickness is a big like play in virtual reality, where like
Yeah.
people are worried about like getting sick, especially if you like get nauseous on boats or planes or whatnot. Like virtual reality can some applications can be pretty hard to deal with at first, and I think there's also a lack of like content, and that's kind of why I started my YouTube channel a little bit, is because
Mm.
there's not a lot of stuff out there. It's very gimmicky right now. It's just like a lot of games, and like even the games aren't really very story driven. There's only been like 2 AAA games released in the last year, and before that, not any. So they're just now starting to put out some like good content for users to actually consume. Because like right now it's just like I'll go meet up in a chat room, and like it's like the internet at the very early days. There wasn't really like a purpose for being on there. Nobody's like really like, oh well, I have to get a VR headset because I have to do like this kind of thing for work or whatever. It's not like email where like you have to have an email in order to work kind of thing. But I think we're getting there. But it's just like it's expensive too. That's another big thing. Is like getting a good headset with a good PC. It starts to add up into even a couple $1,000s to get a good setup running. Oculus is just starting to come out with. They just came out with the Oculus Quest 2, which is a pretty affordable, standalone, completely like detached from computers virtual reality headset that I think is the first good consumer grade headset that'll start to like expand the market a little more.
Yeah, it's probably evolution of hardware indeed, like you say, makes things cheaper and smaller, and also then makes things stand alone, because you know when you need industrial sized gaming machine to actually run anything, that's not going to work for most people.
Yeah, exactly.
But I do think consumer devices are on the go, because I saw a lot of glasses, like mixed reality, augmented reality glasses that, for instance, have the use case where you can just add screens to your computer. So you can just pop them on. You don't really need a screen for your computer. You just, connect them to your computer with Bluetooth or Wi-Fi or something, and then you project stuff there. So you can have, 4K devices in your view, and you don't actually need to invest in those displays, and you can use them anywhere. I think that's very clever. Okay, so, I am very interested in this because I do agree there's not a lot of content, but this market is going to explode anytime soon. I don't know when, but there will be a time. And so there will be a huge demand for content. So if you have the skills to actually create stuff like this, then that's very good for you. Now, how do you actually create a VR software? So let's say a game. How do you do that? What kind of software do you use?
So on the more back-end kind of game stuff, it's exactly like any other 3D game you would make. So you need a game engine. So there's a lot of good ones out there. Unity is the one that I use. It's a C# based game engine based off of just game objects. You put a game object into a visual application, and then you can attach different scripts to it, C# scripts that'll do different things and perform different actions on each one of those game objects. And then
an object is then like a player or a ball or a wall or something.
Yeah, exactly. So just basically anything that you could put in the game would be a game object. And that could be, you can do any kind of action on any one of those things, which creates some really dynamic, just any kind of 3D game. The big difference between, a 3D game and scaling up to virtual reality is you have to have a really good frame rate. So that your game has to be really efficient, because latency is a really big issue for virtual reality. If you have larger latency times, then the users start to feel motion sick because they can register when you're immersed. You have to have a faster latency than if you're doing a normal game on a flat screen. You can tell when it's a little bit laggy, and like the frame rate has to be up at like 90 frames per second in order to like have a good immersive experience.
That's a challenge.
Yeah, it can become a challenge. But yeah, you gotta have a couple different. There's a couple different game engines. There's Unity, Unreal, and then there's Godot, are three of the big ones that come to mind. I dabbled a little bit with Unreal. That's a C++ based game engine, and it also has a visual scripting tool, so it's easy for people who aren't hardcore developers, because you can just kind of drag and drop nodes and connect them together to make if statements and whatnot, and not have to actually do any code. You just like kind of drag and drop nodes together, which is pretty nice for people who are more of like artsy, who like making the game models, but then don't really know how to make them do anything. So you can use this visual scripting language to actually make the game that way.
Yeah. So I'm just a software developer. I'm definitely not a designer or a graphics designer. I'm pretty sure that I can learn Unity and then, drag those game objects on there and make them do something. But then it doesn't look good. It doesn't look like anything really. How can I make them look like a real game? Do I actually need to hire somebody to do that?
That's the same problem I have. I am very much a step by step. I know how to make things happen, and I know know how to do stuff, but getting it to visually look appealing, I could spend hours and hours and hours and it would still like not look the best. So, I mean, if you are a decent artist, you can download tools like Blender. There's Maya, like these 3D modeling software tools, almost like CAD, I guess, for 3D characters and whatnot. And but I could spend weeks and weeks and weeks in Blender and still not come out with a good looking character, because that's just not really who I am as a person. So there are lots of resources online for like, getting 3D models and that kind of thing. So both Unity and Unreal have their own asset stores, and you can go on and there's a lot of free assets that you can download from there. So my thought process is, I'll start with a free asset that looks decent. And then once I get it into the game and get that working, I can always upgrade it to a better high quality paid version. Once I get up to once the game gets to a certain level where I'm like, okay, this is something that I could release, then I can switch out all the assets, the 3D models and whatnot, to more visually appealing things. So like you can still program the game to be functional and be fun, and then come back in with a, visual pass towards the end to like make it all look better. That's kind of the way I go about doing it.
Yeah, that's a good way. And then you would have a pretty decent game already. Let's say I make a game with a basketball game with balls that goes through hoops and you can actually bounce them. That involves things like gravity and physics and such. Do I need to program all that stuff myself?
Not necessarily. You could if you wanted to. If you were like super, super detailed and needed to get it exactly right, you could program your own physics engine. But Unity and Unreal, and I'm sure Godot, come with their own physics engines built in. So when I first load up a game from the beginning, I can put in any kind of object I want, and it automatically has physics applied to it. And like there's obviously options where I can turn it off and on if I want. So like if I don't want this wall to actually be moved, like if it's just like, the boundary of the game and I don't want it like that door to open or whatever, I can turn physics off for it. But any object that you put in, you can add what's called a rigid body. And so that's just like a C# class that is on the object now. And now it obeys all the physics laws that you set. And you can do things with like friction and how bouncy it is, and if it obeys gravity or how much gravity there is and all that kind of stuff. It's fun to play with. I was making a bowling game for one of my videos a couple weeks back and trying to play around with like how frictiony should the surface of the bowling lane be and how bouncy the pins are and that kind of stuff to get a like satisfying like bowling connection at the end where it just pops and all the pins bounce around. So like playing around with all those values was pretty fun. Because at first when I started it and I just like, put out the bowling lane and had the bowling ball and tried to throw it down the lane, it kind of bounced and landed and like just slowly rolled just a little way and like died about halfway through the lane. And I'm like, there's some more physics things I need to tweak in here.
Yeah. It needs to feel natural. And
exactly.
That's difficult to get right, of course. But it's good to know that these engines then take care of all the basic stuff. So I guess they probably do also stuff like lighting and shadows and things like that, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot of preset game objects that come with the engine that I can just drag and drop, like a point light or a spotlight or like the sun. I can bring in to the scene and position it how I want and angle it in the correct direction for the time of day and whatnot. So there's a lot of preset stuff that comes with the game engine. It's mainly the 3D models that you need to get extra. So like the characters and any objects that you need for your scene, like that's the kind of stuff that's extra that you need to like bring in. But a lot of like the physics and the lights and that kind of stuff is all built into the engine.
Very cool. Okay, so we can create this whole thing, and then how does this engine know where I am as a VR player? Because as a VR player, you have hands or something. I have an Oculus Quest, an original one, and that the thing comes with little trackers for my hands with buttons on it, like little joysticks. How does that interact with the engine? Is there like a plugin for it where you can say, all right, this for for the Quest it's this, or for something else it's something else.
Right. So if you, with Unity at least, if you just start up the game engine without doing anything extra to it, it'll just, be a blank camera that doesn't move. It just shows you, the world that you're in, an empty world. But in order to, put on a Oculus headset and have the image transmitted to both eyes and your hands tracked, you have to, for Unity, install a separate plugin. It's called OpenXR. It feels like they change the plugin about every 3 or 4 months, and like it's a completely different way of doing stuff. So there's a lot of different, there used to be a lot of different plugins. So there was one for Steam. So if you're going to make a Steam game, you have to have this plugin. There's one for Oculus specific. So if you're going to make an Oculus game, you have to have this SDK, and like any other, like is very specific to manufacturer and to what platform you're making it for. And so if I wanted to release my game on Steam and Oculus and all of those, it was almost like having to write a completely different controller for each different system. But they just recently came out last year with a system that is supposed to be like the base layer for all of those frameworks, essentially. So I code up one system with one set of input controls, and it's supposed to be able to recognize the inputs from my Oculus Quest and my Oculus Rift, and then the Valve Index and all the different hardware. And it's also supposed to be able to go to any other like platform where you want to release it. So Steam and Oculus and whatnot.
Okay. So you don't have to take care of that yourself anymore. And then once you think you're done, can you then just say, all right, publish this thing, and you get some sort of file that you can put somewhere that people can download it in the Quest store? How does it work?
So it's like a normal C# application. You can kind of export it and make it your own little .exe file where you can click on it and it'll open up on your local machine. But getting it into the Steam store or into an Oculus store requires a whole approval process, and you have to get greenlit, and they have to check and make sure that they're taking a 30% cut of every single transaction you're having inside of your game, and like all that kind of stuff. Make sure it meets, their terms and conditions and whatnot. So there's a little bit of a process. It's kind of like trying to get an app on the App Store or something like that. Because Oculus is Apple, or Facebook.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. Is there not like a deployment platform that you can use where you say, all right, I'll deploy my app to the deployment platform like Azure DevOps, for instance, and then it will be configured so that it will just push the new version to all of the app stores. Does that exist?
I honestly don't know about that. I haven't gotten that far in my video game development to be able to release updates to a game yet. But
okay, well, that might actually
say like there would be a way to do that. I'm not sure though. I haven't looked into it.
Well, for any listeners here, let's look into that, and maybe it's a hole in the market and an opportunity for you to create such a thing, because all of this whole space is relatively new, of course. So there's lots of stuff that we can still create for it to make it better. Okay, and so suppose I want to start today with VR development or AR development. What do I need? What kind of hardware do I need?
Well, the interesting thing is you don't actually need a VR headset or anything to start developing on that. Oculus, or Unity at least, the game engine will provide you with a virtual reality headset, ironically, in the game. So you can control a virtual reality headset with a mouse and keyboard. If you were like wanted to test it and you didn't have access to a virtual reality headset or something like that, you could theoretically do it without. Or you could also use your phone. So there's two different headsets. One of them is a 3 degrees of freedom, and one of them is 6 degrees of freedom. So your phone is a 3 degrees of freedom headset already and can be made into a 3 degrees of freedom. So you have the 3 degrees of rotation, but you don't have position tracking on your phone.
Oh, yeah.
Like it's a GPS positioning on your phone, but it's not accurate enough to really simulate virtual reality yet. And I'm sure that will change kind of shortly. But right now, as it stands right now, you can, put on like a Google Cardboard and use your phone, and you have 3 degrees of rotation. So, but you can't like move in your actual space and have it track you that way. So you could use your phone to test applications. You just wouldn't really be able to walk around in your room and have that mirrored in the game. And then the next step up would be to buy an actual, virtual reality headset. And they go from anywhere from the new Oculus Quest, which is right now about $300 to it's called Vajiro. Hold on, I have that written down somewhere. There's a big VR headset, Varjo, Varjo XR3, and it's a fully integrated mixed reality headset that right now costs about $6,500 and a $2,000 yearly subscription.
Oh wow!
But I've seen some videos of it, and the simulation was like a fighter pilot cockpit, and so the user had the virtual reality headset on, and they were in the cockpit, but then they could see like their legs and the throttle that they were using in real life, but then the cockpit was overlaid in front of and underneath like their legs and stuff, so it looked like they were like physically sitting inside the cockpit, but they could see their own hands and their own body, but then in a virtual world. It's absolutely ridiculous and super, super cool. That's like super advanced enterprise business level. Like if you've seen like the ads of virtual reality headsets where they have like 3 or 4 people walking around the car, like analyzing the sculpting and the details and stuff. It's like, for that kind of purposes. But yeah, you can go from anywhere from a couple $100 headset to as much as you want to spend.
Okay, that's very cool. I am very excited to start actually creating something just to see what it does. So, what are your plans? What are you going to create?
My big inspiration I had a couple years ago was I think this was shortly after reading Ready Player One, and my brain was just like, idea. One of the big ones that I kind of grabbed a hold of and stuck to was the creation of a education school. So the idea is to create an entirely new school system, like a private school. And imagine, so like instead of your kids, having to go to work every day or go to school every day and go to, or even like with COVID recently, having to get up, connect to a Zoom call that they're not really interested in, and have them sit in front of a computer for however many hours and try to pay attention to all these classes where the teacher just talks at you, to instead, at 9 or whatever in the morning when your class starts, you put on this virtual reality headset and the student sees like they're sitting inside of a classroom, and they can see all the other students' avatars, and they can see the teacher's avatar. But then the teacher walks up, snaps their fingers and say, okay, class, today we're talking about the Roman Colosseum. And then the classroom melts away and the Roman Colosseum comes in, and they're standing in the middle. And the teacher says, okay, well, now your lesson today is to go talk to this gladiator, go talk to this person who takes care of the animals, and, go find the Roman emperor or whatever. And to, just experience that history lesson would be absolutely incredible, and like not something the like kids would forget. Like it's something that I would remember for a long time. So imagine applying that to biology or any other kind of I'm having a hard time figuring out how to do the mathematics classes with that kind of application, but any visual class, like biology or art or history or any of those, would be super easy to create applications to just to have a class, like a whole school. So my idea right now is to start out with a almost like a Udemy kind of course or Udemy kind of application where you download it and then you can grab different lessons about different things but it's like a fully immersed virtual reality lesson that only lasts like an hour or however long. But then have I guess the big part of this application would be like a backend that makes it easy for teachers to kind of create environments and whatnot. And then my big plan is to almost create like an entire private school fully virtual reality based, fully accredited, where like you just get sent a virtual reality headset at the beginning of the semester and you just show up for classes, and you still have live teachers if you want. You can still do that because the teacher can just like be there to, help out and whatnot. But I think that would be super cool and completely change the education as it is right now.
I think so too. Wow, that is an amazing idea. Very cool. So, as we're nearing the end of the episode, where can people find out more about you and where can they follow you?
The best place is probably my YouTube channel. So I actually, when I started, learning all the virtual reality stuff, I was, obviously YouTubing like you do, and there was, maybe 1-2 like YouTubers who taught virtual reality, applications and how to develop them and whatnot, and they're all like outdated. Like I said, Unity has been putting out more and more stuff about virtual reality, and so there's been updates and updates and updates, and all the videos I was watching were like, a year, 2, 3 years behind, and all the technology was outdated and didn't really work. So I'm like, oh, this is so frustrating. Like I can't I had to just go through the documentation to figure it out, which is messy and gross. So I was like, well, what if I just start making YouTube videos about, how to do this kind of stuff? So YouTube has kind of become my presence online. I also have a Twitter and whatnot, but I really just post my Facebook videos or my YouTube videos on Twitter. So you see the same content.
Okay, very cool. I will put a link to that in the show notes so that people can find you there. So go and subscribe and follow Justin. I'm sure you're going to create lots more great VR teaching content. Okay, thank you very much for being on the show today.
Yeah, thank you. This was fun. I really enjoyed it.
All right. And thank you for listening. And we'll see you next week.